Bradford here. We are back with another WoW TCG deck tech for the classic format. Today we're going over the Zaritha Control Shaman. She's blue or Alliance. Here she is. She has pay 2, flip her, and heal a target for 5, usually yourself. You kind of just want to survive. So a lot of people used to call this deck Google Shaman. This deck hasn't changed much over the years. This was a big deck. I mean, this was like Cobblade. If you played Magic, this deck was everywhere, and people called it Google Shaman because you just Google it up and get the list and buy most of the cards. It had some play to it, but it's a very powerful deck. Main thing it's trying to do, I mean, it has a master hero that you can get to 10 with, so let's go ahead and read this guy off. Hearthstone players, you remember him. He's good in this game too. He costs 10, he's a master hero. Only certain classes are allowed to use him. Argent Crusade rep doesn't really matter for this deck. What he says is, unique allies you own everywhere can't be targeted by opponents. And he has tap, where you tap your hero. Put target unique ally from your graveyard into play. Yeah, so he gets to reanimate a unique ally from your graveyard every turn. Has to be unique, though. He also has 37 health instead of 28. And then he's also got 2 permanent attacks, so anytime somebody hits him, they're going to take 2 damage back. He costs 10. This deck will often win way before you get to him, but having a really powerful master hero definitely is how a lot of control decks have their win condition set out. As you see, we have a buttload of allies, so we have a lot of other ways to win. Some decks like to go up to 2 on this guy, so just keep that in mind if you're more of a late game player and that's just your style. This is more of a toolbox deck than a pure control. This is the reason why. Our hero is also Restoration. This is Restoration Hero acquired. This is the best card in the deck. It's called Ancestral Awakening. Costs 4. Search your deck for an ally with cost less than or equal to the number of resources you control, and then put it into play with damage equal to its health minus 1. This means you can search your deck for a hero, put it into play, as long as its converted mana cost in the top left corner is less than or the same as the resources, and then you put damage on it to where it basically has 1 health. So you bring anything in your deck out into play, and it has 1 health. So the 1 health thing does matter. I mean, there's a lot of guys that would be much better without 1 health, but being able to tutor up and play any ally, this is good. You know, turns 1 through or turns 4, it's fine. This gets much better on turns like 7, 8, and 9 when you can still only pay 4 mana, but you get to put a guy into play that costs much more than 4 mana, so you can do 2 or 3 things a turn. Let's move right on to the ability suite, and then we'll get to the allies later. It is a toolbox deck, and so I know you want to see those, but Squall Totem, when it comes into play, exhausts all opposing heroes and allies. It even has another effect. If it stays in play, anytime your opponent attacks or protects, you get to continue to tap on other stuff. This usually dies pretty quick. It's more like a 1 mana tap all your stuff and take no damage this turn. Works awesome with Wavestorm Totem. If an opposing ability, ally, or equipment readies, put it into their hands. So you can tap down their stuff and then bounce everything back into their hands so they have to cast it again. Super annoying, really effective. Wind Shear. It's in choose one or both, interrupt target ability or exhaust target hero or ally. Ideally, your opponent plays something you want to interrupt, you do interrupt it, and you get to tap down a guy. But it's really here for the interrupt. It's for these main deck, gives you a lot of leeway in some ability matchups. Alright, next up is Chain Purge. We went over this one in the Death Knight video as well. Target up to 3 abilities, destroy the first, destroy the second if it costs less than the first, destroy the third if it costs less than the second. This means if your opponent has abilities that cost like 4, 3, 2, and 1, you can choose to destroy the cost 4, the cost 3, and then pick the 2 or the 1. It's something like that. So you can get a powerful 2 or 3 for 1 out of this, and 3 of them main deck, 1 more in the sideboard. Really shuts down the ongoing ability matchups. Tuskarr Kite. This is about as Tuskarr Kite as a deck can get. This thing is an ongoing ability. You pay 3 to cast it once. Then you can tap it and tap any ally to draw a card. Or technically it says the 10th card from the top, which matters tournaments and stuff. But against most people, they don't really care. It's basically draw an extra card every turn as long as you can tap an ally. And totems count as allies, so that's already set up for you. Let's go to the weapons. We only have 1 of these in the deck, easy to swipe out. It's an instant weapon, costs 2. When it comes into play, exhaust a hero or ally, and then they can't ready during its controller's next ready step. What you normally do if you tap someone like that is you tap them, but you also flip them upside down. You're stunning them. See how he looks like he's asleep? He's stunned. That's what's going on. So you stun them for the current attack and for the next turn on tapping. So it's like 2 turns with the combat. It's not the best weapon once it's in play, because you have to pay 2 to strike with it every time. But sometimes you just don't have any turns, like 3 or 4 play, and you just want to start killing their allies, or just hitting their face for 3. 3 damage does add up. It's just that the tax of paying 2 every time gets expensive, which is why you might want this card out of the deck. 2 Calamity's Grasp. This 4-cost instant weapon has, when this enters play, choose ability, ally, or equipment. Then you discard a card of that kind, and you can destroy a card of that kind. So, this thing comes into play, it's instant, you can discard an ability, destroy their ongoing ability, or destroy one of your equipments to destroy one of theirs. And if you really need this as a way to destroy more equipments in your deck, and what you need to do is play more of these, probably just go up to 4, and maybe even find a way to squeeze in 1 or 2 pieces of equipment, so you always have an equipment in your hand with this card. That way you can destroy equipment at instant speed. We also have Voice of Reason. This is the main thing that keeps us alive with our health. This thing costs 3, has 2 armor. It says your hero has Mind 2 for each 5 damage on it. You also have Protector if you control no damaged allies. That's not as relevant, but occasionally you can come out of nowhere and your opponent will expect the attack to work and you just protect with your hero. Real bad when they're not ready for it. But the top, you have Min 2 for every 5 damage on it. Min 2 activates at the start of your turn. So if you're at 5 damage and then your opponent hits you for another 10 on your turn, you just heal 6 of that. So they did 10 to you, but now you're healing 6. This thing will just make races go on forever and ever. It even has armor. I've seen games where I got my opponent down to like exactly 23, 24 health, something like that, and then they're able to heal 8 and then wipe my board. It's like, oh no. This thing is going to keep you alive in this deck, so definitely prioritize this if you're taking a lot of damage. Try to find it, try to keep it alive. Keep a second one in your hand, etc. Here's the allies. A lot of these we have more than one of, but several are still one-ofs. Mikael the Blunt. He's a 2-drop, 2/2, when opposing hero or ally readies, he deals 2 range damage to it. It's non-combat damage, so it doesn't work against Aberration, but it does kill off a lot of things in the game. Really powerful, especially because opposing totems count as allies. So if you Squall Totem your opponent's allies, when those totems untap, Mikael will shoot their totems. You have 4 of him in the deck. He's cheap. He works well with Kite to draw cards. He works well at shooting at opponents who are trying to pressure your life total, like solo decks that just have no allies. He still shoots their hero for 2 every time their hero untaps. Then they have to waste a turn attacking him. Great in the aggro matchups. One of the best cards that Alliance ever saw for anti-aggro. Next up we got Adam Eternum. He's a 3-cost 5/3 human warrior. He has Unique. If you look in the middle of the card on the right side, Unique, that tag is going to matter in this deck. He has pay 2 or remove an honor counter from a card you control, remove him from the game, and put him into play at the start of the next turn. So why is that a big deal? We play Eye the Storm, and every time you play a card add an honor counter, you can remove 4 to tap your opponent's stuff. You will be using this to survive. This thing also works as a stock load that just holds honor counters that are easy to get. So this guy just gets to sit and play, and anytime your opponent tries to remove him or attacks creatures into him, you don't have to pay anything. You just remove one of your honor counters, which you almost always have like 3 or 4 of. Take him out of play, put him in play at the start of the next turn. So if you're swinging with this on your turn, you go into attack your opponent, right? I'm swinging at you, and then they play a removal spell on your turn. You get to take a counter, flicker him out of play, and then he comes into play at the start of their next turn. So on your turn, he's ready to attack again. He's really hard to get rid of. He also enters play a lot, which matters a lot because he's a unique ally. Our next ally is Crusade Engineer Spitzpatrick. It's a fun name. It's very gnome-like. He's a 4-drop 3/3 protector who is also unique. And he says when this or another unique ally enters play under your control, you may draw a card. You're going to really like this guy in this deck. So he's a protector. He keeps you safe. Stat-wise, not very efficient. He's a 4-drop 3/3. But he replaces himself immediately by drawing a card. And every time a unique ally comes into play, you draw another card. So I think almost all of these, except maybe 1 or 2, are unique. So 4 atoms. Every time you play one, it'll draw a card. Every time you flicker one out and bring it back in with your ability, that'll draw another card. So he's just a protector that'll help keep you alive, but also draw you a bunch of cards. One of the bigger decisions you'll have to learn to make is when do I protect, when do I attack, and when do I kite with him. And that's just part of the game plan. That's part of why you play the game. Figure out what's better. Weldon, we have 3 of these in the deck. Some only play 1 or 2, but I think he is busted good. He's a 5-drop, 5/5, so really great stats. At the end of your turn, he puts 3 Peasant Ally tokens into play. Each one's a 1/1 protector. And then at the end of your opponent's turn, all those peasants get destroyed. So you never get to attack with those tokens, but you get 3 protectors every turn, so any deck relying on combat damage is just going to have a real hard time dealing with this guy until they get him out of the way. But you have 3 of him, and 4 ways to tutor for him. If you're ever going to die soon, and you have this in your hand, tutor up this guy, and he'll bring you a bunch of blockers until your opponent deals with him. He's one of the easy go-to targets, because he'll have 1 health left, which is the bummer part of this tutor. But his 1 health doesn't matter if you have 4 protectors constantly. Another thing you can do is bring him into play with exactly 1 health. He'll have 4 damage. You can use your hero flip to heal this guy all the way up. That way they can't just ping him off with a single effect. Yeah, it's very good. You can also just end the game by swinging for 5 over and over again. Swinging for 5 works. We have 1 of this guy in the deck. He is not unique. Scrapper Ironbane. He's an anti-equipment. 5 cost 3/4. At the end of your turn, you may destroy target equipment. Pretty easy to search up. If they just have some equipment, you just get to leave this guy in play and pop their equipment. If you get lucky, they won't be able to kill it, and you'll get 2 or 3 turns of killing their equipment, and that should pretty much end the game versus any deck like that. And then we have this guy. Some people only play him in the sideboard. I like him in the main. He's a 6-drop 4/4, so pretty terrible stats. He says, at the end of your turn, he deals 1 unpreventable holy damage to each opposing hero and ally for each unique ally you control. Again, that's 1 unpreventable damage to all enemies for every unique ally. Well, if you have him, he counts as 1. Maybe you have, like, an engineer, so you draw a card when he comes into play, and you're going to deal 2. Sometimes you also have an Adam that just has been flickering in and out and can't really get an attack off. So if you're able to get 2 or 3 of these, and immediately ping your opponent's board for 1 unpreventable holy damage, and bring it up to 2 or 3 unpreventable holy damage, and it's at the end of your turn, they can't even interact. This card's really hard to beat in the Aberration matchup if you haven't done a significant amount of damage before he comes down. He'll pretty much just wipe your board, and it's unpreventable, so you're going to have a hard time recovering through the healing and all the counters and interrupts and ways they have to interact with your allies. Just 1 of him in the deck. 1 of this guy, he's similar, Iravar. He costs 6, he's a 5/1. He is unique as well. He has pay 2 or remove an honor counter from a card, like Eye the Storm. He deals 1 holy damage to each opposing ally. Similar, the reason I have him in the deck, because they kind of have the same purpose, is because this guy not only hits a lot harder, he's a 5/1 instead of a 4/4, which this guy will end up being a 4/1 anyways. If you're playing against a deck that's not Aberration, and you guaranteed need to trigger several holy damage, your Eye of the Storm holds up to 4 counters. So let's say let's say it's like turn 6, and you cast your Ancestral Awakening, bring this guy into play, you have 4 counters, you remove all 4, instantly ping the opponent's allies for 4. So you deal 4 damage, maybe 1 or 2 of them are left with 5 health. You could still play a card that costs 2, you have several of them in the deck, get another counter, remove that counter with Iravar, and also ping their board for another 1 damage. Also, once he is in play, this ability on him is instant. So you can just keep counters on Eye of the Storm, keep him alive. You can use the Protector. That's another thing about this guy. When this thing comes into play, it puts damage on your allies. Well, this guy has 1 health. So if you have no allies in play, and you tutor him up, you have to put no damage on him because he only has 1 health. So then your hero can start protecting him if you've got a Voice of Reason in play. And then you get to keep up instant speed, 1 damage pings on your opponent's side of the board. That is hard to win through if you're a creature deck. Getting out of the 6s, we have 1/7, Pappy Ironbane. He's a 2/7 protector. So if you tutor him up, he'll be a 2/1 protector. Not the coolest stats, but he has at the end of your turn, you may destroy target ability or equipment. He's just this guy for abilities, essentially. That's all that is. The fact he has protectors, yeah, can help occasionally, but you just need a way to deal with abilities, and you have a bunch of chain purges early in the game, and he's your late game tutorable answer. You've got 1 of this guy to destroy equipment in the mid game, or can be tutorable, but you've also got 2 Calamity's Grasp as well, so you have 3 ways to deal with equipment main deck, and 4 ways to deal with abilities main deck. And that doesn't count interrupting them or bouncing them with Wavestorm. I have 2 of this guy. This 9-drop is super important, really powerful. King Varian Wrynn, rip. He's a 9-drop, 9/9 protector. His text is amazing. Opposing heroes and allies have a permanent -1/-1 for every different card type you control. So what that means is if you take a look in the middle of the card, the little blue bar on the left, it says ally. Ally is a card type. Ability is a card type. Equipment is a card type. You know, I thought it was equipment, but I guess it's just weapon or armor, technically. Hero is a card type. Quest is a card type. And location is a card type. Yeah. This guy will regularly come down with -3/3 to the enemy team, because for himself, he's an ally. You are a hero, and you've got to have at least a quest or location or something else on the board. But oftentimes, he'll end up giving their board -4, -4, or 5. It also works on heroes. So if their opponent just has like 5 health left, you just play him, and he might die if you have got enough abilities or different card types in play. Another thing that's interesting is that this guy just stays in play with this effect. So anything that it doesn't kill, it gives it like -3 or 4 attack, so it's super easy to trade into. He is unique, so he'll trigger the draw off the little protector. Really, this guy's just a win the game card, and sometimes he comes into play, wipes all your opponent's creatures, and then they just use the only removal spell they have and kill him. Or he only has 1 health, and your opponent, you tutored him up, so he has 1 health, so your opponent has to ping him off the board. But this is really what you're building towards. I know we have a 10-drop that's super powerful. You really don't need this most of the time. I find that playing a 9-drop 9/9 that kills all of your opponent's creatures is usually good enough. We play 2, because sometimes you draw 1 early in the game, and you really just need to resource it. Sometimes you tutor 1 up, and they kill it, and you're like, yeah, I need another one to win. So he's awesome. Kill a lot of people with this guy. The resource base is small. We're playing 10 resources. Usually I recommend closer to 13 to 16 for a deck. But this deck has so much card draw between Tuskarr Kite and this guy drawing you cards, and it needs to hit the right cards at the right time, not hit like extra quests in your hand. So we got 4 Eye of the Storm. It's pivotal for staying alive and keeping Adam triggers going. 2 Torches. Target opponent shuffles his graveyard into his deck. This is main deck Graveyard Hate. We also have 2 more of these in the sideboard. We should probably change these to the one that only costs 1. That would make sense. And then we've also got Question of Gluttony, just because it's free most of the time, and in this deck, it helps you keep your card count high in the early game, and in late game, hopefully you've got a little bit of resources left over. But the early game is really where you need to get going. You need to be playing a 2-drop on turn 2, a 3-drop on 3, a 4-drop on 4. You need to get that stuff going, and this will help with consistency. Let's move over to the sideboard. Okay, we're back. I changed it. So in the sideboard, you can kind of do whatever you'd like, but this is just what I threw together. You could just do all allies since they're all tutorable, but sometimes you need other things. We have 2 torches in play in our main deck, which is Graveyard Hate and Card Advantage. We should probably consider these in the sideboard. They just pay 1, remove all cards in their graveyard from the game. That'd give you between 3 to 4 graveyard answers that are through quests. Quests are really hard to interact with. And so that's one of the weaknesses of the deck. We've got this thing. Band of the Inevitables, pay 2 to put it into play, then you pay X, destroy it, and each equipment with cost X or less. You can only do it on your turn, but it's a good way to just definitely shut down equipment decks. When you draw your sideboard cards, you want them to be impactful, and this one just kind of wipes the board. It's about as impactful as you can get. A second copy of this guy might just be nice to auto-draw them or to have another choice in case you tutor him up or you had to resource one. Also, it's reliable. It just pings it and kills it off every turn. Another Chain Purge, just helping the ability matchups. That'll be 4 total between main and side. A single Wind Shear. No, this is not something you'd want to tutor up for. You can't tutor instantly, so this has no point. Also, when you tutor, I don't know if you get... I don't know, I guess you get the interplay effect. I'm not really sure. This is just something you can include in the deck that your opponent may not be able to recognize that you're going to play this. It's a 3-mana interrupt. There's several interrupts that Shaman has. It's just the one I threw in here. Marundal the Kindred. He's a 4-drop 4/4. Each ally has attack and health equal to its cost and can't gain or lose attack or health. What is this guy for? This guy kills tokens instantly. Tokens have a cost of 0. So he makes sure all tokens on the board will die instantly, and then any other tokens your opponent plays will die instantly. He also buffs and changes some creatures weirdly. Like Adam is a 3-drop 5/3, but he makes him a 3-drop 3/3. And where it says they can't gain or lose attack or health, they can get damaged, but their stats can't change. So cards like Varian, he turns off Varian's effect. But other weird things he does, if you tutor him, he comes into play with... He's a 4-drop 4/4. He'll come into play with 3 damage on himself. Cards like Iravar, he's usually a 5/1, but this guy will make Iravar a 6-drop 6/6. He just changes how certain cards work. Moving on, we have Collidus the Warp-Watcher. Some people like to play him main deck. He is technically unique. 7-drop 6/4 demon. When he comes into play, put each other ally into its owner's hand. Really the best I've ever seen this card do. It basically comes into play and bounces all your opponent's stuff. Yours too. You play him as a temporary board wipe. You can't tutor up a board wipe, but you can tutor up this guy, or you can just cast him. Another really interesting thing is if your opponent is using Warlock-style cards like Legacy of the Betrayal to steal your allies, or if he's using the Master Hero Kel'Thuzad, which can go into your deck and your hand, your graveyard, and just start taking your allies. Well, if you play this, you technically own those cards. So I've had this happen to me twice, where I was playing against a grindy Warlock deck. They Kel'Thuzad and got like 4 of my best creatures. Then I searched for this, played it, and it bounces all my creatures back to my hand. They weren't even in my hand. They were in my graveyard, in my deck, in my remove from game zone. So it's like his Master Hero drew me 4 of my best allies. That was a good play. Malfurion. 8-drop 3/8, Protector, Stealth, and Untargetable. At the start of your turn, you may put target ally with cost less than or equal to the number of resources you control from your graveyard into play. So he reanimates a guy every turn as long as you have the resources for it. Which, if you can afford him, you can pretty much afford anything. The fact that he's untargetable, stealth doesn't really matter. But Protector and Untargetable are great. You can tutor him, put him into play. If you can keep him alive, he'll just draw you your best ally and play it every turn. He's just kind of like a Master Hero that gets to sit and play with Untargetable much earlier in the game. Netherbane. This is kind of a meta thing. Cards in play you control can't be removed from the game. It only costs 1. The main thing this counters is Warlock Hesriana, removing your allies, and Warlocks Banished to the Nether, removing your permanents. You could play several of this if you think that's going to be an issue. You have no way to search it up, you just have to draw it. So if you really want this effect, you might just want to play 3 or 4. We already went over the quests, getting rid of graveyard synergies. So that's pretty much the deck. You get a bunch of cool, powerful Shaman abilities and equipment. You get to see how Shamans play. What do they do in this game? They're really good anti-abilities, and their totems are cheap, efficient ways to interact with your opponent's permanents. It gets a main deck and interrupt in a class that isn't necessarily interrupt heavy. And it's a toolbox deck. I mean, if that's your style, you're going to have a bunch of it. The deck is very flavored to beat aggro. It's got a lot of healing, it's got a lot of style removal, and it's just got a bunch of removal and damage via allies. It's a really fun deck, and I've seen it win a lot of games that go past turn 10. Hope you enjoy.